continue on with the study guide. The study guide will do a lot today and tomorrow. Wrap it up officially next week and get into that one last and final unit, and that's it. So we're literally in our last, we're now on a single hand, guys. Last final 5 regular class days. Okay, so let's hit it. Well, before I go too far, questions, comments, or concerns? As far as what?
So the flex day, when we change stuff, like what time we have to be if we're not taking exams.
Yeah, all that information was in that previous email. I might, if I need to, go ahead and send out a reminder on that. So seniors be here 2:15 in the gym. We'll go over graduation information first, and just kind of go over a few details on that. And then we'll do your painting and art projects. Ceiling tile, if you want to bring your cap to decorate that day, that's fine too. Let you sign on the wall. And then that'll be the main thing before the awards day ceremony. The only thing, like I said, I think we'll hack it out this afternoon because we've got a leadership meeting this afternoon to figure out what our numbers are. I got to pull up my sheet so I know how many responded. And then, so I tell you what, I'll send that out tomorrow once we finalize what our numbers are to let you know whether it's going to be in the big gym or high school gym or central gym because of numbers.
And the individual graduation.
Yeah.
Are you here?
No, both the individual and the big group will be at the central gym because we're going to have it set up for both.
Okay.
Yes, so both of those will happen there. Yeah, and the information and details on all that we'll talk about next Wednesday on the mini flex day. Yeah, so let me make myself a note. I'll push that email out tomorrow after I have those last couple of details. Okay, all right, good deal. Good. Other questions, comments, concerns? Anything else? Okay, so again, like I said, we got today, we got tomorrow, virtual on Friday, and it's just Monday and Tuesday unless you have for me the final exam next week. That's it. Show's over. Hallelujah. So let's go ahead and take care of your question. Tell me this. What was the Watergate scandal? Talked about it yesterday. What went down? Their campaign. Yeah. So they broke into the Republican committee, mostly made up of, and I like calling it by its full initials because it spells out creep, but the Committee for the Reelection of the President, the Republican Party trying to get Nixon reelected, breaks into the Democratic headquarters, campaign headquarters in the Watergate Hotel, taps their phones, goes through their files, and then let's talk about who all was involved. So obviously that committee, and you can just call it the CRP, Committee for the Reelection of the President, that's fine too. It goes by both. But the committee to reelect the president, Nixon, we find out his VP, Spiro Agnew, is in on it. We find out all these top ranking officials are in on it. And then in the end, Gage, how do things wrap up? Good deal. Yeah. A lot of people go to jail. A lot of people resign. And we have, again, history in the making because we have our first president and vice president to both resign. Agnew resigns first. And when he resigns, that means Gerald Ford kind of gets pushed up, and then he gets pushed up again because Nixon resigns as well. Again, he never admits guilt. Never admits guilt, never says he had a part in it. He just simply says he feels like that if he does not resign the office, that he will not have the full support of Congress to take care of we the people. So two things make history, because one, Nixon is the first president to resign the office. And then what is the second piece of history that is made? Yeah, we have to call on the 25th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, and it is the furthest we have ever made it down the order of presidential succession, all the way down to number 3, Speaker of the House. And Ford makes history as being the first unelected candidate to hold the office of the presidency. So yeah, a lot of history being made there. Most of it not a good thing to be making history in. But there you go. There's your bell ringer. Good review from yesterday. Okay, so if you are doing things on paper, have all the paper stuff out so we can go from one to the other, to the other, to the other. We are going to start, as soon as we go over a few things with notes, we're going to go to your new review sheet first and do that section on, I think it's called the 70s. I think it's the title of that news, maybe 80s. I don't remember. Okay, thank you. So we'll go to your review sheet first. We'll finish section 3 on the IDs, turn in the IDs and SQs. We'll go to section 3 in your packet. I think there's 2 things we'll do in it. And then we'll move on to your study guide. So we might have to wrap up on that last and final page tomorrow, but we'll have everything done except for literally 1 page. We'll do that tomorrow. We will transition into the 80s, and that's what we'll spend our last couple of days on, is doing 80s. And I am going to probably use Tuesday to talk about 9/11, the 90s, and then what happens on 9/11, because that's a piece of history that you really can't just walk on past. Speaking of, if you like books, and even if you're not a huge reader, there is at our book fair, which I knew about him because the middle school actually got to Zoom meet with this author, and he gave them class sets of his book. But his book is called Ground Zero. And Ground Zero is what they refer to, what happens or what the zone is when both the Twin Towers go down. They called it Ground Zero. So he writes his book about that. But it's an awesome book. Super quick, easy read too. All right, sorry. Let me put this up and we'll wrap up. We're going to finish where we left off yesterday as far as notes go, and then move on. Okay. All right. I think I got all my stuff together. Okay. All right. So quick review of where we left off yesterday. We were talking about how a lot of situations were going badly. We talked about how the economy is not going well. We look for a new president, a new leader, and we have Mr. Jimmy Carter who comes in, and that's not his real name. His actual birth name is James, but he says it's too formal. He likes to go by Jimmy. So that is actually a really big deal. Is it on his? Oh, never mind. I couldn't remember what it said on his actual presidential picture, but it has him on there as both. But he gets elected, and a lot of people like him, and they call him a quote outsider because he is not, they feel like he's not tainted by Washington politics, that he is just a small town guy. He has only been governor, or the highest position he's ever had is being governor of Georgia. So people are really excited about him being clean, I guess, as far as not having Washington dirt on him. He promises to bring integrity back to the office. He wants new energy development. He wants tax reform, national health care. And he is hoping, again, to kind of restore the office and people's trust in the office of the presidency. So he comes in. Unfortunately, he comes in at a time that is not really well, like with the economy. We're still in the Cold War. We're still having issues with other countries. And we get into an issue with oil. That was a big one. And again, how ironic is it that we're talking about this right now? But anyway, oh, how ironic is this whole semester been, because so many things You hear the quote, the history repeats itself. Oh my gosh, guys, I'm telling you, it's so crazy. Like, it might not repeat itself in like a sane form every time. 1918 Spanish flu pandemic. What did we just experience? Our own pandemic, right? I mean, it's crazy. Are y'all not like loving this? Like, not in the sense that you're glad it happened. I mean, in the sense that it's like you can sympathize. You understand, you're like, I get it, right? I mean, anyway, okay. All right, you know what I'm saying? So the economy's gotten worse. People are freaking out. All right, just like yesterday, legit. Did you guys not see like every gas station that you passed by, like 50 cars? Like some were worse than others. Like it kind of depended on where I was at. Like Sheetz was a madhouse. And it was kind of weird because I felt like people were picking like kind of the weirdest gas stations to go to because they're like sitting out in the middle of the road. Like that's a super dangerous decision that you're making. But that's kind of like Biscuitville. You guys ever seen Biscuitville in the morning that people make that insane decision that it's okay for me to sit out in the lane out in the middle of a road? I mean, it's like, what? You're just lucky that somebody is, people are paying attention and they're not like running up on you, realizing that you are dead stopped. But anyway, okay. So a couple of things. Human rights policies, what's going down. We see all across the world that there's a lot of issues there that we want to try and help in if we can. We are really excited because we feel like we see the end of the tunnel coming with the end of the Cold War. It's getting close. We're in the last decade. And when I say last decade, I am referring to the 70s, not today. But we are in the last decade of the Cold War. Détente, everything that Nixon had started with the idea of easing tensions. It's still very much like a roller coaster ride. Like it's off, it's on, it's off, it's on. So we renew the tensions that are happening in the Cold War. We condemn the Soviets for what we hear they're doing because they're still not allowing their people free speech and all the things, which is obviously what we support. In 1979, the Soviets invade Afghanistan. We established an embargo with them. Again, this is not something that has just popped up, faded away. Anytime another country invades another one, we automatically show that we don't agree with that by cutting them off. Like we stop trade with them, we cut off an embargo with whatever it is we're getting from them. So we have an embargo with grain with the Soviets. We boycott the 1980 Olympics that happened in Moscow that year. And later, actually, here's another fun fact. Carter is yet another president that will win a Nobel Peace Prize for his diplomatic relations. He meets with the leaders of Egypt and Israel. Again, here's another ironic thing. Speaking of Israel, they're actually in the news right now. They're actually experiencing more. I mean, they've always been a site for religious wars, but it's like being ramped up again now. But he gets a Nobel Peace Prize for working towards world peace, again, between the Middle Eastern countries. That's a really big deal. They call it the Camp David Accords because they go and meet at Camp David to kind of talk this out. We again ratify the treaty that returns control of the Panama Canal to Panama, that will be official in December 31st of 1999. Again, I know that's way off as far as where we are in history, but that's coming up. And here's the picture. Here he is. Here's Carter, and he's working with, again, the two leaders of Egypt and Israel as they are working towards peace in the Middle East, which is really kind of an oxymoron because they've never really had true peace in the Middle East. But Carter's presidency is going to end with a really bad situation, a hostage situation. Okay, so here's what goes down. All right, it's the Iranian hostage crisis. It happens in 1979. And again, we talked about this before, that there are a lot of countries around the world that we have embassies in. And an embassy is where we have government officials that are there that are constantly working on business deals, trade deals, building political relations. They're also there to help any American citizens that might be in the country. So here's what goes down. The Shah of Iran is supported by the U.S. and they are also one of our big oil, or they were, I'm sorry, they were one of our biggest oil suppliers. Buffer against the Soviets. That Shah becomes really unpopular with his own people and he is forced to flee the country. And guess what? Who comes into power? Well, somebody that is anti-American, which is this guy, and I'm not going to attempt to say his name because I will butcher it. But he comes into power as the new leader. He does not like the United States. He wants us out. He is going to support a lot of groups that are against us as well. There is a group of Iranians that stormed the American embassy. They ended up taking 52 Americans hostage, and they keep them hostage for over a year. So negotiations keep going back and forth. And we keep telling them that we do not negotiate with terrorists. We do not negotiate when it comes to certain situations. They keep sending these like crazy videos. Like they have the Americans speaking on camera and they are video recording it, but they've got like it kind of looks like a pillowcase that they've like thrown over their heads. So you can't see what they look like. You can't tell, if they've been like beaten or whatever. So they've got this, again, it looks like a pillowcase over their head and they're videoing them speaking. And it's pretty obvious that what they're saying is what they've been forced to say by these guys. So they are sending all these videos and they're posting it on the news for people to see. And so everybody's freaking out. Obviously, we want those Americans home and we want them home safely. It takes over a year to be able to negotiate them. And there's actually several movies, one in particular that has Ben Affleck in it that I remember, to where they are trying to sneak them out. Like they're trying to get them out and they end up trying to sneak them out. But anyway, Carter tries to negotiate. It doesn't happen. It's at the very end of Carter's presidency. They don't get released until 1980, and so they actually will be released while Reagan is president. Carter loses that election. Again, people are going to blame the president for whatever doesn't go well. The economy's not good. Still in the Cold War. Oil crisis. Hostage crisis. So all those things keep Carter from winning the election. Look at that, there it is. The hostages are held for 444 days before they're finally released. There's the new Shah that comes into power that is anti-American. And we just feel like a lot, how sometimes we feel like certain situations, like, how did you not see that coming? Like foreshadowing, right? Kind of how did the United States not see World War II coming? As we talk about it, we talk about all the foreshadowing that leads up to it. Well, a lot of this is foreshadowing of what will lead up to 9/11 and the terrorist attacks of 9/11. That there are so many countries, Iran, Iraq, Pakistan, Afghanistan, so many of those Middle Eastern countries, that a lot of that hatred and anti-American feelings stem from the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And it's like, how did you guys not realize that it was so bad that it's going to lead up to something this massive? Fun fact, did you guys know that the World Trade Center had previously been bombed before the 9/11 attack? They were actually had a smaller bomb that was placed in 1993 in the basement of one of the buildings that went off. It didn't cause the buildings to collapse. There were some deaths. The numbers are nothing close to what it was for 9/11. 100 people were injured. I think there were only 5 or 6 that were actually killed. But 9/11 was not the first time that they had been bombed. A lot of people don't know that. So here's a picture of our hostages finally being released, but we did get images like this and others of them being blindfolded, of them again having bags and stuff over their head. We get them back home. We're still pushing again. 60s and 70s, very much a hippie movement. Go green, be environmentally friendly. Rachel Carson writes her book about environmental freedom. We established the EPA. And do you guys even pay attention? Like April always has Earth Day. Well, we established the very first Earth Day in 1970, still have it today. But we do have a big accident that happens. Here's the accident. I think I actually talked about it last week. But it happens at 3 Mile Island. 3 Mile Island in, there it is, Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, March of 79. These nuclear radiator reactors end up leaking, and they leak and they get into the groundwater that goes out to the surrounding communities, and people have to be evacuated. Obviously, it's going to kill plants and animals and wildlife. It is a major thing to have to clean back up, but we realize obviously we need to do a lot to make sure things like this never happen again. We make sure that we work on keeping things clean. The big debate over whether we should use and destroy land to get to oil and things like that. And that's why Alaska ended up being a major purchase for us, because of the natural resources that come along with it. Yeah, that's good enough because we got other stuff to get to. All right, that's where I'm stopping. That's it for today. And we'll officially get into the 80s tomorrow. So make sure you get out all the things. We will start with your review sheet, then go to your IDs, your packet, and then study guide. Okay. All right, let's do your new review sheet first. So it says the 70s, and we're basically reviewing what we went over because we're having to go through it really fast. Number 1 says, who became president after Nixon resigned? That was your bell ringer. Ford, there you go, Gerald Ford. Gerald Ford. All right, number 2, we talked about this yesterday. This makes a lot of Americans really mad that he did this. But number 2 says, what did the new president do to Nixon? He chose to do what? Issue him a presidential pardon. Yep. He chose to issue him a presidential pardon. That's going to upset a lot of people. They don't think that's fair. They're like, no, he was wrong. Don't forgive him for that. Number 3, this was the human rights agreement that was reached involving most major nations of the world. And we talked about this yesterday in your notes. It's the Helsinki Accords. All right, Helsinki, Helsinki Accords. Number 4, we talked about him today. Who was the quote outsider who becomes president in 76? Jimmy Carter. That's what I was going to Google yesterday. I meant to Google it to see how old he actually is, but I forgot. Pretty sure he's like in his early 90s. Early to mid 90s, maybe. 96. All right, well, I was 3 years off because I kept thinking 93 the whole time. Look at that. That's impressive.
And he's still alive.
Yes, and active. And active. Yes. Yep. Number 5, we talked about this today too. In an effort to correct previous wrongs, the U.S. agreed to give up this area in 99. Okay. Panama Canal. Panama Canal, we're going to give the canal back to the Panamanese. That's fun to say. Just say that. Panamanese. Okay. Number 6, this was an agreement reached under the guidance of the president between Israel and Egypt, which helped bring some peace to the Middle East, and it was named after the place in which Carter took them to negotiate. Camp David Accords. Camp David Accords. Number 7, this was the crisis that involved U.S. hostages and religious fundamentalists. The Iranian hostage crisis. Number 8, she was the author of the environmentalist book Silent Springs. Rachel Carson. Yep. Rachel Carson. And last but not least, the last thing that we just looked at, number 9, this area was the site of the worst U.S. nuclear power plant accident. Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, 3 Mile Island.
This might be a little late to ask this, and she has some questions. What was the Twin Towers? Is that like one of those significant things?
Because it was an easy target to get a large number of people at one time. Because you've got 3 things that factor into it. So obviously, no matter what location they hit, they were going to be taking out a large group of people on the plane itself. There were over 60 people on each plane. So they're taking out the people that are on the plane. At any given time, there is a minimum of between 2,500 and 5,000 people that are supposed to be in the Twin Towers at any given day. But average, somewhere around 140,000 are coming and going from both towers at various times. So they knew they were going to be taking out thousands and thousands and thousands of people. So that's one of many reasons. The other target they hit is the Pentagon for obvious reasons. They want to take out the leaders of our military branches. And there are only guesses as to where Flight 93 was supposed to go. We are guessing that Flight 93 was either meant for the Capitol building to take out Congress, or that they were targeting the White House. We don't know because those passengers, God bless them, those passengers took the plane down and it crashed in Pennsylvania. But we're assuming it was supposed to be one of those 2 locations. But it's because they were trying to hit the largest targets to take out the most number of people and to start taking out the biggest branches of our government. It's really sad. And it was not just because they did choose the Twin Towers, they actually ended up taking almost 100 people that were visiting from other countries that were ambassadors and business leaders from, I think they wrote down like 82 different countries where they had ambassadors and people that were visiting. So they didn't just take out Americans. They took out, like I said, people from other countries. It's crazy. But with the exception of the planes did have children as passengers, but they were able to evacuate the child care centers that were in both the towers. So we know the children in those areas were saved, but every flight had between 5 and 12 children on the planes. So anyway, it's crazy. All right, we're going to talk about it next week, though. It's a lot to talk about. All right, your IDs, section 3. Where'd I put mine? I haven't. There it is. All right, let's bust out your IDs and SQs, and I'll get those from you here in a second. Again, if you have not done so already, use today's time at the end to go ahead and finish those IDs. But we'll do the questions together. Number 6 in section 3 says, what are the national origins of the 3 main groups of Latinos in the U.S.? I was curious to see if you guys even knew that answer. The 3 largest groups of Latino Americans in the United States. You had to guess. Mm-hmm. All right, so yes, we have Mexicans. What would be another group? You would think so, but there's actually more Dominicans in the United States than Puerto Ricans. So Mexicans, Puerto Rican, or you messed me up, Dominicans, and the 3rd largest group are Cubans. Now there's like a lot more than that, obviously, but I'm giving you the 3 largest Latino Americans in the United States. Number 7 says, what is the American FI forum, excuse me, and that is Hispanic Veteran and Civil Rights. It's there for Hispanic veterans and civil rights for Hispanics. All right, and to speed it up with number 8, I didn't take a whole lot of time to get into the details. It wants to know 2 court cases that support Latino civil rights and how. I just put one, again, to save on time, and you're not gonna be tested on it. But it's Mendez versus Westminster is one of the court cases. Mendez versus Westminster. And it's about discrimination in schools. Number 9, what achievements have been made by different Latino groups? Jobs, pay, and representation are the big ones. Jobs, pay, and representation. And we're talking about political representation. And number 10, what is the Bilingual Education Act of 1968? It gave its financial assistance for education. Financial assistance for education. And it's talking about how all schools, and we still do this today, all schools have an ESL program. That's something that you have from elementary all the way up to high school. ESL program is English as a second language is what it stands for. So if we have students come in that English is not their primary language, and that's not just for Hispanic Americans, it's there for Asian Americans, etc. That if they come in and English is not their native tongue, we have this funding to assist in helping them make the transition. All right, any questions on any of that? If you need to finish defining those IDs, just set it to the side. I'll give you time at the end to let you define those, and then I'll take them up from everybody before we wrap up today. So let's go to your packet, and then let's head to the study guide. All right, the packet will be pretty quick because we're going to do 2 things. We're going to do 27-3, which is just fill in the blank, and you can just follow along with that one. And then what's the other one? Yeah, no, we're going to do the timeline, rock and roll music. We'll do that one. So we might have to wrap up on that last one tomorrow with the reteaching because it'll take a little bit longer. All right, here we go. 27-3, guided reading. Latino Americans face discrimination and segregation in the Southwest. Number 1 says the numbers of Mexicans living in the Southwest steadily increased in the 1800s because the United States acquired land. Squeeze it in. Acquired land where Mexicans lived. Again, you have to go all the way back to American One for this. Think about the Mexican-American War and how we got from California all the way down to Texas. So Hispanics were already living in those areas before we acquired it as part of the United States. Number 2, most Mexican Americans in the Southwest live in, and this was an old vocab term, barrios, B-A-R-R-I-O-S, barrios, which were a product of the region's history and discrimination against Latinos living in their own segregated neighborhoods. Number 3, in the 1930s, federal officials launched a series of deportations. That became known as the reparation. Number 4 says in 1954, the Eisenhower administration began a program that deported more than 3.7 million. That's your answer. 3.7 million over a 3-year period. Section 2, Latino civil rights organizations fought against discrimination. Number 5 says the League of United Latin American Citizens ended segregation. Segregation in public places in Texas. Number 6 says the American GI Forum was founded to protect the rights of Latino veterans who were denied medical services by the Veterans Administration. Section 3, organizations and protests led by Latinos were successful on many fronts. Number 7 says Cesar Chavez and Dolores, we'll go with Dolores, organized groups that cooperated in a strike to demand union recognition. I don't mean to skip names. I just always feel bad if I was like to butcher it and say it wrong. Number 8, the group founded by Chavez and Dolores merged. That's your answer for 8. Merged to become the United Farm Workers. Number 9 says the new union continued a nationwide boycott of grapes. Yep, grapes. That lasted until 1970 when growers finally agreed to meet their demands. Number 10 says in 1969, protests by Mexican American Youth Organization led to the creation of bilingual education. And you could just put bilingual ed because I realize that's a short space. So bilingual ed is okay. But it's bilingual education program in which immigrant students are taught in their own language while they learn English. Number 11 says a new political party known as, and it's 3 words, La, L-A, Raza, R-A-Z-A, Unida, U-N-I-D-A. La Raza Unida, which is translated into United People, helped the elected Latino candidates at the local level. And last but not least, number 12 says in 1969, students at the University of California at Berkeley staged a sit-in to demand the creation of a Chicano Studies program. And that's C-H-I-C-A-N-O, Chicano Studies program. All right, we're going to jump to the timeline and then we're going to run to your study guide. We're going to try and get caught back up on getting that study guide done. All right, timeline, rock and roll music of the 1960s. The music groups, particularly rock and roll groups of the 1960s, provided a voice for the conflicting feelings of the protest generation. Their songs had a tremendous influence on the popular music and counterculture of the day. Along with their great successes, however, came equally great tragedies and failures. All right, so we're going to put 2 different categories: accomplishments, tragedies, and failures. Okay. All right. So we're going to start with the Beatles. That's the name of the group, Beatles. And then we are going to put, let's see, what can we put as their doing accomplishment? Accomplishment is largest audience in TV history. That was a big one. The Beatles had the largest TV audience in history. All right, let's put Bob Dylan. You have to tell Mr. Fortune. Let's see, what can we put? Let's put, we can put a tragedy is that he suffered a motorcycle accident. Yeah, so Bob Dylan and tragedy. Suffers a motorcycle accident and actually retreats into his home for months, like locks himself up for months. Like people legit thought he was dead because of that. Next, we can put Jimi Hendrix. Now that is another tragedy. It's pretty awful. Jimi Hendrix is going to die of a drug overdose at only 27. He's only 27 years old. Let's see. We got 2 groups left, Rolling Stones and Beach Boys. Rolling Stones, we can put, let's put something good. Let's do accomplishment. Let's do number one song on the charts in 65. And let's do Beach Boys. I love the Beach Boys. I can't listen to it yet because we're still in school. Like I can't pump myself up wanting the beach and know that it's still a few weeks out. So I gotta wait. All right, Beach Boys. We're gonna put a failure. 1969, they get dropped from their label. Like all big groups, eventually something's going to happen and they fall apart, just like NSYNC. That was a tragedy. Yeah, NSYNC. Yeah, a good one. I cried hard on that one. Yeah, I blame Justin. Anyway, all right, so that's it. That's it. All we've got left is that one last and final page. We'll knock it out tomorrow, but let's head on to your study guide. Let's head on. All right, now I stopped in a different location with you guys than I did third block, so you might have to throw me a bone and tell me where we stopped at. Okay, all right. I couldn't remember if we finished the page or not. I didn't think we did. All right, so we're gonna bust out this page and then we're gonna see how far we can get in the next 10 minutes so that I can give you some time to wrap up on the IDs if you need it. All right, 43 says new foreign policy of the U.S. beginning in the late 1800s, where we are seeking to establish colonies in different parts of the world. So we go from isolationism to what? What's the other ism? Imperialism. There we go. Imperialism. Fantastic. 44, he wrote a book called The Influence of Sea Power Upon History, where he stressed the need of the U.S. to build and upkeep a modern and powerful Navy. Alfred Mann. And it's M-A-H-N, Alfred Mann. 45, what is our battle cry of the nation in the Spanish-American War after it was destroyed in the harbor of Havana, Cuba? Think about the ship that got blown up. Remember the Maine. Here we go. Remember the Maine. To hell with Spain. It's just fun to say. 46, group of volunteer cavalry soldiers led by Theodore Roosevelt in the Spanish-American War, made famous during the charge up San Juan Hill. Rough Riders. 47, U.S. foreign policy goals sent by John Hay to several other nations, stating the hope of the U.S. that all nations be given equal access to China. It was named after the open door notes. It was the open door policy. There you go. I'm so proud of you guys. You got it. 48, name given to the sometimes rough but always effective politics of Theodore Roosevelt. He used this type of politics to battle trust, establish national parks, build the Panama Canal. How are you gonna remember this? This is the fun one to say. It is the big stick policy. Come on, big stick policy. Speak softly, but carry a big stick. That's what I say. Yeah, 49. I about said 50. 49. This is the addition to the Monroe Doctrine, where the U.S. states that any interference in this hemisphere will be done by the United States. Named after Roosevelt. No, Roosevelt Corollary. Roosevelt Corollary. All right, 50, you guys should know this because we've talked about it a ton in the last few weeks. What is the U.S. Supreme Court case that made segregation legal? There we go, Plessy versus Ferguson. 51, African-American leader who advocated the teaching of trade skills to help achieve economic equality first and founded the Tuskegee Institute. Booker T? No, Booker T. Washington. Booker T. Washington. Number 52, the African-American leader who was the first Black graduate of Harvard. He stressed that Blacks need to be given the same chance at higher education and civil rights as whites, and helped to found the NAACP. Du Bois, W-E-B Du Bois. Remember, his name is all the initials. W.E.D. Du Bois. W.E.B. Du Bois. 53, one of the female leaders of the women's suffrage movement, and was the first woman to have her picture put on a U.S. coin. Okay. Susan B. Anthony. '54, a group of middle-class reformers who sought to improve society in the early part of the 1900s. Name that third party. Starts with P. Progressives. Yes. Yes, progressives. 55, name given to the investigative journalist of the progressive era who tried to show the corruption and greed that was affecting the nation. Muckrakers. Fantastic. Muckrakers. 56, name that muckraker. This muckraker wrote a book called The Jungle to call attention to the lives of immigrants. However, the book did bring attention to the horrible conditions found in the food industry, nation's food industry. Yes, it is Upton Sinclair. And again, if you pay attention, the questions coming up, I'll give out the answers. So speaking of Upton Sinclair, 57 wants you to name his book, The Jungle. 58, muckraker who wrote about the history of Standard Oil and exposed the harsh business practices of Rockefeller. This is Miss Ida Tarbell, and it's IDA, Ida Tarbell. 59, idea that you should help those that are less fortunate than you, and this was practiced by such groups as the Salvation Army and the Settlement House movement. Social gospel, very good. All right, we're going to see if we can squeeze in 3 more, and then I'll give you time if you need to finish up on the IDs. All right, 60, reformed governor of Wisconsin. He was a leader in the effort of bringing about voter reforms like secret ballots, recalls, referendums, and initiatives. They called him Fighting Bob, but his actual name was Robert La Follette. 61, who became president when William McKinley died and was known for his big stick policies? It is my man, TR. Yes, TR. Theodore Roosevelt, known to his friends as Teddy. TR. Okay. 62, program of Roosevelt to help give every person a fair chance. He pledged to fight the bad trust and to help reform the evils of society. Think of a shape. Maybe that one. Square deal. There you go. Square deal. Let's see. Let's squeeze in 2 more. 2 more. 63 and 64. 63, government agency created after the publishing of The Jungle to make sure the food and medicine we take are safe. FDA. Yes. 64, party started by Roosevelt during the 1912 attempt to run for president as a third-party candidate. Yeah, Progressive Party. Yeah, it's nicknamed the Bull Moose Party, but yes, it was the Progressive Party. We can do 2 more. 2 more. All right, 65. Socialist leader during the early 1900s, received nearly 1 million votes for president and helped to found the Industrial Union movement. Talked about him yesterday. That is Debs, Eugene B. Debs, and that's D-E-B-B-S. And 66, progressive reform under Woodrow Wilson that created a system of national banks throughout the nation to control the country's banking system. We still have this today. What is it? Federal Reserve. And 67 actually gave you the answer. Federal Reserve is in there. Which you can go ahead and answer 67. We're not going to say it out loud because it's an odd number and I can't stop there. But if you would like to read ahead and put the answer, that is fine. Okay, so we will continue tomorrow. We'll see if we can get close to busting out the first 100. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to give you time right now to finish defining your IDs if you need to. I think there's like 15 total, something like that, maybe give or take a few. So if you need